What I wanted to talk about is this cinematic. I'm going to be using this cinematic as sort of the springboard into something that must be discussed before we can get to the final discussion of the night, before we can get to the final cinematic and also theory of the night. There are some things that's laid out in the cinematic that is very important. Now, some of you really want me to watch this so that I can discuss, or so that we can see how it is actually Denathrius that brought down the Arbiter, and that would again be very true. Denathrius is the one that is blamed for the drought of the Shadowlands. They keep saying it. It is Denathrius that brought down, he is responsible for the drought in the Shadowlands. That does not necessarily mean that he is responsible for the breaking of the Arbiter, but it could be. I just want to point out, right, before we continue with anything else, Blizzard told us when they first revealed the Vein Theory to us that these motherfuckers, this motherfucker specifically, we should trust him at our own risk. Like, I can't remember what the exact line was, but it basically boiled down to he is most likely not trustworthy either. And yes, I've seen the Dark Portal statues in the background. Ranathal, Prince Ranathal, yeah. Blizzard tells us that he is most likely not trustworthy either. Which just goes to show Blizzard is playing some next level games here. That we might not yet understand, but I do think that Blizzard is working towards the first time ever a macro plot twist, a plot switch that all players will have to be on board with almost instantly. But okay, so yes, these portals looking very similar to that of the Dark Portal maybe gives us an idea of who taught Sargeras how to build Dark Portals.
Denathrius!
It is similar squeals. The squeals is definitely similar to that of the Arbiter. That I will agree with, actually. But we don't see a sword hitting the Arbiter. And that is clearly a sword. That's not what we see here. But then again, maybe the sword entered, left its corruption, and then fucked out again, right? That is possible. Why I will give this to the sword, why I will actually take the sword as a possible answer, is this. The moment before that red light hits the Arbiter, there's a scream. And the sword definitely sounds as if it has its own personality, its own voice, if you will. The sword sounds like an actual person, a soul that was maybe forged into a weapon, if you will, because there is a scream before it hits. Listen closely to this.
Find every soul to the afterlife it justly deserved. Until...
Do you guys hear that? If you're not hearing it on my PC, it's as loud as it can be. But if you're not hearing it on my PC, go watch it yourself and listen to the moment before it hits, as it zooms in, as the camera zooms in. There's this a squeal that happens, not loud, very sort of dampened, but it's there. And that is an actual scream. That's not just a sound effect. There is an actual voice screaming as that comes down. But anyways, let's continue. Spain, bro.
This was your valiant last stand. For so very long, you've punished arrogant souls. But instead of learning from their suffering, you've become one of them. You just needed to obey.
What is interesting to me about this, and I think I pointed this out on the live stream as well. For so very long, you have punished arrogant souls. And yet you've learned nothing. But if you look at the obvious things. Now, I've already discussed this. Steve Denuzer made it very clear. What is obvious in the Shadowlands is not necessarily obviously true. The Shadowlands does seem to be a sort of bizarro world where up is down and down is up. Bastion, for example, is described as this very beautiful, beautiful place, but yet extremely dark when you get to the core of it. There's a darkness that brew inside it, right? Ardenweald is supposed to be this place of life, and yet it's filled with death. So there is a sort of opposite world that happens here. Everything screams out that Denathrius is an arrogant prick. Yet he tells Ranathal, you learned nothing. From all your eons punishing the arrogant souls, you still haven't learned anything. You just needed to obey. What is he trying to tell him?
You just needed to obey. How fortunate you are to witness the splendor of what is about to unfold. Every precious drop of anima, so painstakingly wrung from the tortured souls of lesser beings, now paves the path for the banished one to reclaim what was his.
So as I pointed out when we did this video as well, for the banished one to reclaim what was his, that's the first sort of absolute evidence that this did once belong to Zovaal. Something was taken from him that belonged to him. This is not just saying, you know, he thinks it belonged to him. This is not just saying he wants the Shadowlands because he thinks he's the ruler of it. Denathrius confirms here he was the ruler of it. He was the owner of it, and he is coming to reclaim it.
And once his liberation is secured, it shall be by his will that all is washed away. The only power that will emerge from this torrent of change is death.
Boom! Now, if you follow me on Twitter, you would have seen a tweet yesterday where I sort of shared my newest belief. The tweet is as follows. Do I still have Twitter open? Probably fucking not. Let's go. Zovaal is the jailer of the Shadowlands. However, what we've been told is a lie. He was never meant to jail the souls of the irredeemable. No, he is the jailer of death. At the heart of Torghast lies death, imprisoned by order and life to ensure domination. So if you follow me on Twitter, you would have already known that this is happening. But so this is now the umpteenth time we've heard death. And if you go back to the official, if you look at the official subtitles for Blizzard, death is spelled with a capital D. Now, in order to understand this, let's just quickly go to, you guys know where we're going. You should know by now. You should know by now whenever we're doing any sort of speculation theory, we do need this little bad boy. Otherwise, what's the fucking point? All right. So in order to understand this a little bit better, we quickly need to look at the cosmological forces once again. I know you guys might be sick of looking at this map, but believe me, it is necessary, right? You have all of these forces, right? All of these cosmological forces, and each one of these forces have its own sort of goal, its own sort of purpose for what it wants with the universe. Each one of these forces has its own sort of perfect vision for how the universe should be laid out. It stands to reason that Death would have one as well. What would that purpose for Death be? Death. We know what every single one of these forces want because all of these forces have told us what they want. The light wants complete and utter obedience of everyone and adherence to their one truth. Disorder wants to simply destroy and throw everything into chaos. Life wants to create life. Order wants to order things and imprison things. Things that throw order out the window, it will order it. Void wants to consume all things. Now, of these cosmological forces, there are two that we already know. One of them, death, being almost instinctively, and the other, life. We've seen what happens when there's too much of it. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go replay the dungeon, The Evergrowth. I believe this was in Cataclysm. Or was it WoD? I think it was WoD, actually. Excuse me. I think it was WoD. Go play The Evergrowth, where light can do whatever the fuck it wants. There is nothing that stops life. It consumes everything. It just keeps consuming. It keeps effectively corrupting to the point of destruction, if you will. You look at the two cosmological forces, right, of life and of death. I mean, instinctively we sort of know that death is, if you let death go, it will kill everything, right? There will literally be nothing left. Is it inconceivable to anyone in chat right now that order might see what death is up to and decide to step in? Is there anyone in chat right now that finds that probability inconceivable? There would be no beings. There would only be souls and energy if death wins. Death wants revenge above all else. Shadowlands is already corrupted with order. It is possible, definitely. Alright, so everyone at least thinks that it is conceivable, right? I'm gonna assume that those of you that didn't answer would at least agree that it is conceivable. That order stepped in and said, hold on, we don't like this sort of unchecked death. Death needs to be controlled, right? And so it made its move. It stepped in. Denathrius stated here that at the end of it, the only thing that will remain is death. You see, Zovaal being released is the first step. Zovaal is not the ultimate enemy, and they have sort of gone back and forth on this even in interviews, where even now Steve Denuser did sort of say, Zovaal might not be the final boss of the expansion. Death will be the final boss of the expansion. Let's just keep looking.
Paves the path for the banished one to reclaim what was his. And once his liberation is secured, it shall be by his will that all is washed away. The only...
Just more evidence here, very quickly. Oh, by the way, those of you that heard that he will be the final boss, this was said by Ian in an interview about 2.5, almost 3 months ago. Ian was asked, and I think this was with Ballilar, where Ian sort of said, yes, Zovaal is going to be the final boss. But it was very recently, I'm talking less than 2 weeks ago, in an interview, that I think two of the lore, one of the guys works for the lore department, another guy, I can't remember which group he works for, or which department he works for, but he was asked again, so the jailer is going to be the final boss, and he said, well, we don't want to tie ourselves down. We'll see. So yeah, the final boss thing. I know that there's a speculation theory right now, Kamikins. I can see it. A lot of people are saying, but wait a second, maybe Zovaal isn't the actual jailer. Maybe you're right. I don't know if that is true or not. For now, I have no idea. I'm just saying, let's wait and see. For now, I'm going to believe that Zovaal is the jailer, but I do know that there's a prevailing theory on the Discord where people think that's not true. Zovaal is not the jailer. And that's perfectly fine. I'm just saying I don't necessarily subscribe to that theory just yet. Anyways, let's continue watching because we do have another cinematic that we have to also look at before we can continue.
Power that will emerge from this torrent of change is death. Death and those who shaped its victory.
He's talking about death as if it's an actual person. Is it just me hearing that? Or entity, rather? Death and those who have helped to shape its victory. That's an actual, like, persona that is subscribed. Or, yeah, sort of attached to death, right? There's a persona attached to death.
Only power that will emerge from this torrent of change is death. Death and those who shaped its victory.
Someone will stop you, Denathrius. Even if I...
Do not speak. Observe.
Fuck.
Remember this lesson.
Alright, he used to be he used to be a brother of the Primus, of the Archon, of the Winter Queen. Yet, he views things the same way as Zovaal. Now, of course, there's something even more important to be taken away from this, and that is that the Primus himself claimed that he always suspected that Zovaal was not working alone. And now it's been confirmed. Denathrius have always been working with him. Denathrius was always on the side of Zovaal, trying to help him. So what is it that Zovaal is trying to do? Well, in my estimation, the very takeover from Order, if we are correct, if everything we say tonight is correct, and Elune is in fact the sister of the Winter Queen, and Elune herself refused to follow through, when Order attacked the Shadowlands and placed itself as the ruler of the Shadowlands after defeating the Lords of Death, when even Elune said, hell no, I'm not getting a part of that. And this is where the Winter Queen and Elune maybe had their first sort of falling out. It may very well be that Zovaal and Denathrius had the same idea. The idea that you can contain death, that death is something to be contained, perhaps the corruption of it is the biggest issue here. The fact that yes, when they first stepped into the Shadowlands, it was to contain death. But it's become so much more than that. If you play Shadowlands right now, do we actually have the ability? Fucking, I'll keep disconnecting. Never mind. We'll play later. If you log into the Shadowlands right now, right? Can you tell me that this is anything less than slavery? We are used as slaves for these Eternal Ones. And it could very well be that someone like Denathrius and someone like Zovaal did not like where things were going, did not agree with where things were supposed to go. And so they decided to side with the very entity that they were sent to overthrow. They decided to side with death. Death, capital D. And of course, we now get into the land of theories where, if you zoom out of this map, where do the first ones align? That, of course, is also a pretty big question, right? Where is the first ones on this cosmological map? As I've argued, the first ones have, again, their own sort of communities around these forces. These forces are the result of the first ones. So Death would have its own first ones, and Void would have its own first ones, and Disorder would have its own first ones. So each one of these cosmological forces, in a sense, has its own first ones, and this helps to establish a sort of godhood within the universe. In other words, this is a battle of gods, and what makes this even cooler is that we as mortals now decide to go against these gods, to stand up against these gods. But of course, in order to understand that, we need to get to the final theory of tonight, which we'll do in a moment. But that one will go very much around Sylvanas and Anduin. But before we get to that, I want to end this theory on this last moment. Just before we escape the Shadowlands or the Maw for the very first time, Anduin helps us by using the light, and this convinces Zovaal of something. Anduin tells him, right? You lost. Can we actually find that cinematic quickly? Where is that fucking cinematic? Is it this one? Yes. It's this one. I found it. I found it. Don't need to panic. I have it.
Nothing escapes the law. Yield to the inevitable.
They've stopped their advance. The light is with me, even here. Go, champion! Go!
Alright, so he finds this interesting, but what does he find interesting? Does he find us being able to use the relic of the first one interesting? Or is all of this Anduin? Is the interesting thing for him Anduin? Because at first I thought that what he found interesting was us. Us being able to leave using a relic of the first ones, but he already knows this, right? He already said, a relic of the first ones responding to a mortal, impossible. He says that just before this cutscene starts. So he already knew that the relic was responding to us and that we would most likely be able to use the relic. Now he could say interesting because he didn't actually think we would be able to escape through the relic. Why is this interesting to him? I mean, of course, it gets even better.
You have failed.
No, I have precisely what I need.
Before I say anything. Before I even say a fucking word, hold up.
one! For the Alliance!
That always bothered me. Why the smile? And back then, I said multiple times, right? I said this multiple times. Him using the light for her was something. Now, at the time, my argument was maybe because he is trusting in the light and that is a problem for him. But yeah, it's because she got him to fight. He is standing up. He is willing to fight. He is willing to go as far as it needs to be. But then why does the jailer say that I have precisely what I need? Why is Anduin using the light there so important to the jailer? I don't have a definitive answer for this. They want Anduin for something. They've already said that. Maybe he needs power from all forces of the cosmos to unlock death, but a workaround is to have mortals use their power to unlock it. Jeremy, but he does not want Bane. Why wouldn't he want Bane? I mean, he tells Bane that your soul I find your soul wanting. He's got Thrall, he's got Jaina, and now he's got Anduin. But that still leaves him with a hell of a lot of powers that he doesn't have. Right? So I'm not coming to a conclusion on this thing, because I genuinely don't fucking know what the answer to this would be. I'm just gonna leave it there, right? I'm gonna leave that there. Why is Anduin so important to the jailer? And of course to Sylvanas, who seems to go, and this is important. No, we'll discuss that in the next topic. I don't want to discuss that just yet, but we will discuss it on the next topic.